Serhiy, can you introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, gentlemen and ladies. Let me introduce myself. I'm Serhiy Kharitonov. Currently, I am CEO of two companies. One is outsourcing company. Another one is a product company as well. I am part-time CTO of American company ShiftPost, which are doing the platform for the workforce management. And I do have 33 years of IT experience and kind of 250 projects done successfully as well. I've been working in different industries and areas, beginning of the USSR time with military and aerospace and some missile appliance and development, including then bottle tank simulator, real simulator of Soviet's bottle tank. And then after the crash of the USSR, I was going to the more business and outsourcing software development. And beginning from that time, I've been working in different companies. It was several outsourcing companies in Ukraine. Then I've had that experience like CIO of big group of companies in Moscow, Russia, where we did and done, by the way, the big digital transformation of the big retailer Svyaznoy. And then I returned back to Ukraine after the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and double another Ukrainian outsourcing company and was invited to the US startup like Creator IQ, who is currently a unicorn in US and leader in the influencer marketing, and then launched several companies in Ukraine and was invited like CTO in ShiftPost company, another startup in US. And that is in short my way, let's say.
That's great. There's a lot of stuff there to talk about, and I love this. So this meetup is about outsourcing, and this is where I'd like to start. But later on, I would like to also ask you a little bit about your other experience, because I'm sure you have a lot to say about leadership and also about cultural differences between the East and West. But let's start with outsourcing. I would like to first ask you, what are the different kinds of outsourcing and the pros and cons of each type?
Well, let's say outsourcing is a general name of the several threads, which includes near sourcing, offshoring, and outstaffing, I would say, and as well outsourcing of fixed bid project, which has limited and defined budget, terms of execution, and schedule, let's say, and as well. When we are talking about the nearshoring, it's mostly related to the, I would say, subcontracting of the vendor who are close to you and are working very often in the same time zone, or time zone which close to the client's time zone. And it's easier interconnect and communicate because you do have the pretty good overlap between your client and the dev teams. When we are talking about the offshoring, it's usually related to the outsourcing from US to the Europe, and we do have pretty small overlaps, better with Eastern courts, which are usually up to 5 hours, and less with Pacific time zone, which are usually 2-3 maximum hours, when we do not have the special condition when team are going to duty at night time to support production, for example. And as well, Another, I would say, very good differentiation, this outstaffing, when the outsource partner provides a skilled and experienced staff to the client to extend the development team on the client side remotely. And let's say outsourcing, pure outsourcing, when the client just came with ideas or with some problem, and we are fully responsible to fix and or develop the product from the scratch, or fix the problem and fully manage and are responsible of the final result. And a kind of the fixed cost project is when we are estimating and providing the proposal to the client, and client just transfer full responsibility of the team building, process organization, and delivery process, etc., on the side of outsource partner. Now, this is several kind of the different interconnection between the client and the outsourcing partner.
Got it. So next question is, when would you recommend which one? So say I'm a client and I'm thinking, okay, do I want to work with a partner that is going to manage the whole process? I just tell you what the problem is, or do I want to work closely with your team and on a day-to-day basis, and maybe I want to treat your staff kind of as if it was my staff, and basically have daily scrums with them and work with them as if they were an ordinary member of the team. When would you recommend which form?
Let's say it depends on the culture on the side, on the culture and type of the client from my perspective. For example, if your ISV client, an independent software vendor who has pretty good established development process, structure, and ideas, and the team who are responsible on the final result, usually such kind of the client prefer to use out staff, just to scale their local resources with our resources, and full responsibility management, schedule management, team management, etc. are on the client side. If you are talking, for example, about the startups, mostly startup has just an idea, very limited on the budget, and wanted to deliver as soon as possible. And in such cases, very often startups come to outsource partner whom that they trust, and outsource partner take all the responsibility to deliver a result himself with communication and collaboration, but responsibility on the establishing the right process, environment, building team composition, etc., full responsibility on the side of outsourcer. If you are talking about the enterprise client, depends on the industry and some compliance and restriction. For sure, we prefer to build because usually enterprise clients has much bigger scale and project, etc. We build the, let's say, mutual team. It's split between the client side and outsourcer side, and collaborate like one common team. And in such cases, responsibility are split between outsourcers and clients 50-50% approximately, depends on the team size on each size, etc. And usually we are participated in such collaboration like the partner, when we can propose something, improve or make some changes, improvements from our side, and agree on the client to make such more effective collaboration model. Sometimes it could be fixed price. Fixed price is a kind of the when outsourcing fully responsible for the final result. Fixed price could be not with every of such client. When client are ready to transfer full responsibility for module or part of functionality or some services, or a kind of the component development fully to the outsourcers. And depend on this model, very important to keep the right process, for example, and specification in place, because fixed price should be good specified, and without the good specification, it's hard to go. And from that standpoint, if client do not have such specification, we propose to have such upfront development, the phase, we name it a discovery phase, when we investigate, prototype, and make some technology proof. It's important to not have obstacles and restriction at the end when we invest a lot of money, time, and resources in the development to be sure that final product or service targets the non-functional requirements on that stage. As well, we make a more accurate estimate. It's not rough range like on the beginning, and it's allowed to the client to allocate the right budget and has good understanding of the schedule and good understanding of the team composition. Usually we have the defined responsibility for every site, because client usually need to provide us with some UX sometimes, or some interfaces to integrate, or some accesses to external system or interfaces, or external services. And all such responsibilities should be provided to the outsourcing partner in time to not slow down development or prevent the delays, etc. And well, I would say this is major factor how we are working in different type of the clients and different model of the outsourcing.
Great, that's a very comprehensive answer, especially that you've already answered some of the questions I was going to ask about fixed price. And okay, you mentioned specification, how important that is when you're doing fixed price, and that you're doing this early stage discovery stage to determine the specification. Got it. So can you now—
Maybe Aleksander, I would add, I forget to mention a kind of R&D work. Some clients came to us with big uncertainty in the requirements, just based on the idea. And usually we need to conduct a kind of R&D investigation when we make the same prototyping, but we produce several hypotheses, and then making the prototyping, we prove what the best approach we could put to the base of the product to not have the issue on the delivery stage.
Okay, got it. Now let me ask you about challenges. So what typically goes wrong in these projects, and how to avoid that? Right, you know, what can you do in advance to avoid challenges or mistakes happening?
I would say that it's maybe strange to hear, but main obstacles is English and communication and collaboration. Usually there are no issue on technology and technical side. I would say post-USSR educational, let's say, system to have the good knowledge in technology and all this stuff around technical stuff, but communication usually depends on the culture, because, for example, when we are talking about the American clients, they are more politically correct in compare, for example, to the Ukrainian guys. Ukrainian guys are basically straightforward in the communication, which sometimes could impact the good communication, because American clients do not understand this. And it's just because of the English, it's not native our language, and we just directly communicate to not feel all this flavor of the language. Sometimes cultural differences, for example, we do have, and we train our people about the 6 barriers, better to not touch, because different countries has different cultures and For example, currently I'm in Amsterdam, in completely different culture in Holland, in compared to even to Germany or Ukraine and US, for example, and they tolerate many things which are not obvious in other countries, for example. And from that standpoint, it could be a kind of psychological barrier between the clients and our developers, and we need to take it in the consideration. Could be another issue related to the same speaking level of the people. They afraid to speak just because of the poor language knowledge and speaking level. And client usually treated like the rude guy who not to speak to him, etc., etc. But what my experience shows that it's related to the brain. You know, brain has two parts, and one is responsible of the language skill, and other of the logical skills. And the guys who speak badly, let's say, they are better programmers finally, and vice versa. And but usually clients choose on the interviews the guys who are speaking better in English. And from that standpoint, it's hard to explain that people do not speak well just because he has much hardage. He or she has much better hard skills in compared to soft skills. But it's not critical. We are working, we figure out the issue. Sometimes we introduce the project manager who solve and conduct and help to organize this effective communication. And as well, for sure, when we are following agile technique, usually we conduct the stand-ups, especially currently we do have the wide range of the video, audio tools and chat systems which allow you to overcome such issues.
Got it. Yeah, I think your points about communication, that was very interesting. I was thinking, you know, what the difficulties could be, and you mentioned that, and also the point about some programmers having very good hard skills, but then struggling in speaking and talking, and then failing the interview because of that. That is very interesting, and I think that applies everywhere. Can you?
I just can make such example. For example, when we are talking with, for example, Western clients, they avoid such direct and straightforward word like problem. They usually use we do have the issue, and our developers just strictly tell about the problem. And usually clients on the Western side, if he had about the problem, it's trouble and big issue, you know. Right. From that perspective, they are talking about the same things, but due to the different culture and not native speakers, our guys just directly to tell about the problem. And usually it's not a problem, because sometimes such issue resolved within and related to some configuration or versioning or some issue which are resolved within 15 minutes. But when clients heard about the problem, it's like a tsunami, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's a different word, and suddenly it has different connotations just because of that. So can I ask you then, you know, with all the experience you have leading a number of different companies, how would you recommend structuring the development process, especially in a situation where you have developers from different countries working remotely? You already mentioned stand-ups. You mentioned bringing a project manager in. Any other tips, ideas? So you mentioned agile. What else could you advise?
I would recommend, if you are talking about the business, because there are another industries, for example, it's just off topic, let's return them to business. From my truly belief, because I work in different organizations and different industries, I would say when you are talking about the government or a kind of insurance or banking, organization, it's much applicable to use rational unified process just because of nature of that organization. If we are talking about the, let's say, mission critical industries or application, for sure, it could be avionics, it could be car. When we develop some internal middleware of low-level software, satellite and all that stuff, it's important to use, for example, I would say waterfall. It's classical waterfall because, for example, if we are develop some software to manage nuclear power station, you cannot follow agile principle, fail fast, because it will be a little fail fast and last.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
But when we are talking about the business are more reactive and proactive, depends on the business cycle and market needs. And from that perspective, I would say agile is the most suitable. And when we are talking about the agile, they do have several forks of agile. I would say we are currently using Kanban dashboard with Scrum, and it's covered 90% of the needs, including remote team, because Scrum and Kanban allow you to structure better communication collaboration process and staging it, and everyone look on the Kanban and on the same page. Doesn't matter where you are sitting in the globe, let's say. Lean is not such good in such case. From my belief, that Lean is more suitable for the team who are sitting in one location and could collaborate over the day and exchange the opinion and help each other. It's more flexible and more light process, but when we are talking about the time shifts and low overlap, when you have limited communication and collaboration time overlap, it's better to have more structural process. And from my truly belief standpoints, it's Scrum plus Kanban. It's actually Jira tool set, Atlassian tool set, allow us to cover all that stuff, and it's pretty popular in the outsourcing currently. I would say more popular than Microsoft MFC and other similar tools. I would say Atlassian tool set support this process in the best way, I would say.
Got it. All right. This was actually great. And I would like to talk to you a bit more about this, because this is actually very interesting, the rational unified process that you mentioned, because this is not popular nowadays. But as you do say, there are situations where this project, that methodology may fit better. So you mentioned government, you mentioned banking, and that sort of setting. So can you tell us a bit more about that? So why is it? So you you gave us the great example from the military, but then from the point of view of software, what sort of software packages, or I should say projects, would you recommend developed that way? And actually, before you do this, let me just do one thing. I'm going to change the view now to gallery so that we can all see each other. And Jay, Viral, just feel free to ask questions in the chat, or just post them there, or just turn on your mics and ask them as we go. So what is it about rational unified process in your mind, and what kind of projects?
Let's say before Agile was very popular rational unified process, the IBM delivered it on the market. I do not remember the year. I do believe it's beginning of the 2000s. And it was pretty popular before Agile methodologies, and currently even exists some mix of the RAP and Agile. Why RAP is more suitable to government and banking and insurance-like companies? Because first of all, it's nature of such clients. They do not have usually a single point of decision who makes a decision, which in business is more important, and decisions are not so spread between several people. And usually they do have the pretty formal acceptance process. And to meet the success on such acceptance, you need to have the pretty good specified initially every stage. They do have the same iteration, let's say, but they are longer than in Scrum. In Scrum, usually we use 2 weeks or 3 weeks cycle. And when we are talking about the rational unified process, they use 1 month up to 2 months, usually iterations. And on the beginning of every iteration, they specify all the functionality should be done. And then that specification is the base to acceptance. And why it's important? Because when you do have the several people involved in the acceptance process, you should need at least the common document which, let's say, express all the needs client wish to get within that iteration. If you do not have them, then you cannot find who is responsible for all the feature, who ordered that feature, etc., which are obvious in Agile. And from that standpoint, for example, governmental don't like to be at the one point of the decision making, and usually when acceptance process began, you need to go from the bottom line on the every technical lead architects and get the sign off of their part of the responsibilities, and go to the boss and managers, they sign off, and up to top until you will finish the acceptance. And in Agile process, you can do that, but it's very risky that somebody do not have the initial specification and just stop all the acceptance process and ask, okay, guys, who ordered that feature, why you do that, etc., etc. For sure, nobody do it on their own responsibility on the outsourcer side. Somebody should request it, but once somebody requested and it was not documented, and it was a wrong request from the boss standpoint, usually on client side, nobody recognize it and don't want to be responsible of it. And to avoid such situation, I just recommend to use the rational unified process. It's even more structured and more documented than Scrum. And each responsibility of the roles are defined much clearer there. And acceptance process in such cases much, let's say, effective. For example, from my experience, I did several banking projects according to rational unified process. And for example, in Moscow, it's VTB Bank, we did acceptance within 1 day. Nobody believed it because usually such acceptance takes half a year. But once you did it in the right way and everything was specified, documented, nobody argued, and the acceptance was like that.
Okay, got it. Right, so that's very interesting. I think this is very important to all those large companies, like you said, where you don't want to have one person make a decision. So this is very, very good advice. So can I then ask you because the title of this meetup is effective outsourcing. So let's now focus on the first word here, effectivity, how to be effective. So what can you advise to your client to make the most out of outsourcing?
Well, from my standpoint, there are simple paradigm. It's people process tools. you need to have the right people, right process, and right tools, plus environment. Tools means environment, which include development environment, QA, testing environment, beta staging, production, and document environment, as well communication, collaboration environment. Once you establish all this stuff and introduce right process, it means not only responsibility of outsourcing partner, it requires some discipline on the client side too, and right people who can do that on the right position, and team composition should be established in the right place. You will succeed for sure.
That's great. Now, can I ask you, how can a client tell a good outsourcing company from a bad one?
I do believe once you will meet the client expectation, client every time happy. If you several times fails with expectation and delivery result, for sure a client will complain.
Okay. Okay, got it. Now, I'd like to ask you a bit more about the current situation, with COVID and with the lockdown. So how has that affected the outsourcing industry, both from the point of view of finding clients, or for clients finding outsourcing companies, or finding staff, for example?
No, I would say the COVID changed the game rules. Before we were looking for the client, and we do have the big lead generation process and sales support, blah, blah, blah. And due to the COVID, many businesses going online. And currently, I would say it's changed all the games. Currently, clients are looking for reliable and good outsourcing who can deliver. And from that standpoint, I would say currently we do have a lot of the requests, and we are mostly struggling for the development and IT resource, not only development. When we are talking about the fully structured team, it's contains of developers, QA staff, business analyst, project manager, product owners, DevOps, let's say, technical writing in some case, etc., etc. And currently, the most critical are developers, because it's the most productive stuff. Without the coding, you will not deliver anything, and it's impacted in both ways. From one side, we are happy there are a lot of the requests in new job on the market. On other side, we are struggling for the resourcing and staffing, etc., etc.
Okay, got it. Now, okay, so let me actually go back a little bit and ask you. So, in this time of COVID, why would a company want to do outsourcing, given that they can hire, from anywhere in the world? What's the benefit of outsourcing? Because remote work has become fairly common, right? So what's the value added of outsourcing?
First of all, current, especially in lockdown time, there are no any difference between the local team who are working remotely, and usually you even cannot imagine where your people are sitting. Sometimes in the Hawaii, sometimes working from any other place where internet is. Not only from home you could expect, but sometimes it's wrong. And from that standpoint, the world become flat. And from that standpoint, it doesn't matter where developers are sitting, in US, Utah, California, in Europe, or Middle East, or in Ukraine, Russia, Philippines, they become equal. And then the common rates are more or less the same, become in outsourcing, doesn't matter, it's Brazilian, Argentinian, Indians, or Ukrainians, or Philippines. Before COVID, it was different, and with some deviation. And I would say that Ukraine was a little bit higher rate than Indian guys. Philippines has lowest rates, and etc. Currently, it's more or less equal, depends on the skill set of and experience of developers. But there are different in the technical understanding. And I would say if we are talking with the client, usually they prefer to work with Eastern Europe, who are technically much better organized. But when you are talking about the bulk development of not complex functionality, usually they are going to the Indians, where they could provide a lot of the less technical, but number of resources for the scale. And currently a lot of outsourcing has mixed more technical architecture issue, or some uncertainties are resolved, but small team from Eastern Europe and all other bulk development are going to be outsourced to Indians.
Okay, got it. So can you tell me a bit about how you actually started and how you essentially built this company? You built a number of companies, but we are talking about outsourcing. How has it started, and what were your beginnings?
Well, first, my experience was a company named SoftServe Ukraine. It's one of the biggest currently in Ukraine. I joined it when company has 40 people on staff and 7 years of from the establishing. It was 2000 year. And then I bring to the company some technology understanding how to build right process, development practices, using patterns, application blocks, and all that stuff. And we are going exponential. We start to grow on the exponential way. And I left the software when it was around up to 4,000 people, and was invited to the Moscow. In the Moscow, it was a big organization with 20 billion revenue per year. It was 16 business lines. It was retail, classical retail, online, e-commerce services, more than thousands e-commerce services. It was, I would say, insurance, banking. It was MVNO mobile telecom. It was some TV set-top boxes, some stuff we develop on the hardware level in China, and Israel company developed some firmware soft. We developed some business soft. Some company was in London, and it was fun. It was 3,500 classical stores, which I targeted to integrate in one common environment. And it's allow us to manage all the stocks and transport logistic, warehouse logistic, etc., etc. And it's giving me the vision how the end client and what require from the outsourcer. And that time I was outsourcing some stuff to EPAM company, it's big outsourcing, and software company. And I established right process from the end client perspective to manage that outsourcing companies, which allow us to transform all this business within two years. Then I returned back to Ukraine to other outsourcing company. It was around 600 people on staff, and due to my previous experience, vision, and knowledge, we just doubled that company within 1 year, up to 1,300 people with something. And then I decided to launch my own company, JetSoft Pro. And what is interesting, it's not classical outsourcing company, because I decided to build all the internal infrastructure and all internal software based on open source. Currently, we do use 30 different open source tools integrated in one common environment. And once we will finish a kind of ERP system based on Odoo community version, we just spin off it in product company. And currently we do have the same HRM system, which are serving us and are ready to spin off to the separate product and internal CRM and ITSM system. And once we will get the scale and capacity of the real product, it's my way to spin off it in separate business and company, etc. And thus we continue to use it like internal infrastructure to optimize our internal outsourcing processes, etc.
That's interesting in on its own. So just can you tell us a bit more about this? So you used an open source product, ERP
Yes.
product,
Yes.
and you've become proficient with it, and you spun off a company that sells services around it, integrates it for other clients. Did I get it right? Okay, interesting. So are you in touch with the original makers of the software as well? Do you work with them closely?
Usually, we just download the code from GitHub and continue improvements until we will fix all the issue, let's say, we found in that code, and we add the functionality we required. And just my concept is simple. If I make something useful for my company, which allow me to improve the processes, why it could be not useful for other similar companies, etc. And
okay.
We just spin off it in separate product and market it. Why we spin off? Because outsourcing services and all outsourcing structure of the company is different of the product companies. And from that standpoint, you cannot make the two mix of the two companies together in one. That's why we spin off it and build all this marketing sales strategy separate of the outsourcing company.
Makes sense. Okay. Can I take you back to the earlier point in your career when you mentioned you were managing some contractors, external contractors from EPAM. So you're working for a company, you're a client. How did you structure it then? What did you do to make the process better?
That is what I told you, because we do have the pretty big project. It was 10 million budget project that time. The goal was to integrate and make the using some machine learning mechanism and big data and private cloud capability to integrate all this IT system, which serves 16 business of that group of companies in one common IT infrastructure, which allow us to get more efficient general process of interconnection between the different business lines. And one of the major idea was the main goal from the CEO was to identify your client in every business. Once we can, it's a kind of omni-channel concept. For example, if you come to our bank, we identify that, for example, Serhiy came here. We know the history of interconnection with him in the retail, in online service, and in the insurance, in travel, etc., etc. And we do have the full profile of that. Let's say Serhiy Kharitonov, and it's allow us to personalize better service and improve our service in every touch point where we connect. And we usually could build the system which not identify you in place of the POS. For example, in retail, we do have the mobile app who identify your telecom, etc., etc. And we could identify in any point our clients. And knowing the history, our ML capability and personalization allow us to help to provide the better service and better offer in every such services. And from that standpoint, we involve the outsourcers, and some part of that infrastructure system was outsourcing, like part of them like R&D work, because I was restricted with the capacity of internal dev team. Another was work like extension, where I pure understand what we do need and have the management capability to manage the guys, but need to extend the part of the teams. Another, we just outsource like the separate components to our outsourcer, and they did us according to interfaces we defined and within the defined time, schedule, and scope.
Okay, great. So I'd like to take us back to the communication and the cultural mix, because this is something you mentioned at the beginning, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit more. So what would you advise to people, for example, from the United States or the UK or Germany, perhaps, who work with Eastern Europeans, work with Ukrainians, work with Belarusians, work with Russians, in terms of communication, in terms of essentially person-to-person communication? And you really spoke actually quite a lot about it. What would you advise to them? What can they do?
No, first of all, we do need to structure in the right way. For example, team who are working on the same functionality should have at least 15 minutes every day as a stand-up. No, it's named stand-up, but it could be distributed between the different locations. But anyway, even online stand-up allow you to sync the team on the goals should be and identify the problems. For example, on the beginning of the day, the Scrum Master who conducts stand-ups should cover three important cases. First of all, what the problem is, because sometimes people just locked on some task because do not know how to resolve it, and it should be resolved and identified on the early stage. Then we do not understand what was done till that meeting and plan for this day. Sometimes if you have, for example, very intensive development, we conduct 2 stand-ups, morning and evening time, to better structure it and better control the result team are going to get within the one working day. This is on the level of the teams who are working on the low level. Then when the project is bigger, you need to conduct after such daily stand-ups, the Scrum of Scrum or product owner collected the product owners or product or business analyst, it depends how it name it, and conduct the same regular meeting to better understand how scope is burnout of the projects. And then we need to have regular weekly sync meeting with the client on the top level, and once per month, for sure, we need to have the retrospective meeting when team are reporting gotten result, showing some demos, and provide the plan for the next period. And usually it's not later than 1 month. We need to conduct on the top levels such a review, which allow us, first of all, to keep, let's say, transparency for the full structure from client and owner to the bottom level till development from one standpoint. On other standpoint, it's allow us to keep everyone aligned with the progress and with the gotten results. Sometimes owner or sponsor of the project could change the direction or change the priorities. It's important to not lose this time and on the early stage identify it. And such retrospective allow you to provide the result, get feedbacks, and depends on feedbacks to correct the next scope of development. And
okay, got it. So we are nearing the end. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience? Something I haven't asked about?
We do not talk about the crisis management. It's separate teams, because I've been very often involved like the crisis managers to resolve the issue if dev team may make some delivery delays, etc., etc. And usually it's it should be more experienced senior level guy with right authorities who can directly talk to the top level of the clients and resolve the issue. Sometimes issues are caused by the bad discipline or bad synchronization between the major stakeholders on the client side. Sometimes it's bad communication. Anyway, somebody with more better seniority and more power should step into such project to help to resolve the situation together with client. And one of interesting collaboration is when we need to come to the client side and work together. It's for 1, 2, up to 3 months usually. To enforce some development and help to build the better trust between the guys within the team and between the outsource partner and the client. And anyway, I would say, no, in COVID time in the restricted, but from my experience and help to build the much faster, synchronize all the people and build the trust and allow us to build much common and align all the standpoints, expectation, etc., on the early stage. And usually before the COVID time, we started the project with the visit client to us or us to client side and work together at least several weeks before we go and separate to home and work through the different locations. Currently, the situation was changed, but I do believe it's returned back in soon.
Okay, great. So let me just summarize. We talked about the different forms of outsourcing. We talked about nearshoring and offshoring. We talked about fixed price and time and materials pricing. We talked about the different structures, the processes, the communication. Would you like to summarize any, and do you have any last comments in the summary, Serhiy?
No, I expected more questions from the auditory and the guys who join us. Anyway, I'm thankful that they have the, let's say, the time to hear what I'm talking about, and maybe it's helped to somebody to recognize some wish or issue or improve the collaboration if you do have their partners. And I would be happy to help on that if it helped. No, as well, I am open to any question and communication if somebody needs to advise. I'm always open.